Will you please raise your hand if you would use products or services from Huawei or ZTE? None of you would. You obviously lead intelligence services, so that's something of a biased question. Raise your hand if you would recommend that private American citizens use Huawei or ZTE products or services. None of you, again, are raising your hand. Thank you for that.
Hashtag awkward. Yes, Republican Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas back on February 13th, putting lead intelligence leaders on the spot, asking if they would use China's Huawei technology. No hands went up, and this news not sitting well with the Chinese telecom giant. Overnight, it looks like Huawei is now suing the U.S. government after preventing government agencies from buying Huawei technology, calling it, quote, unconstitutional. Just moments ago, the State Department declined to comment on this lawsuit, and this, as new research suggests, that Samsung and Apple are increasingly losing their share of the smartphone market to Huawei. So what does this all mean on the heels of 5G's exciting new rollout? Let's bring in Barron's senior tech writer Jon Swartz, who has covered Silicon Valley for over 30 years, enjoying the rain, I'm sure. John, great to see you. So
Hi,
we have Huawei launching this lawsuit, calling it unconstitutional, and we also have the CFO awaiting extradition trial in Vancouver, Canada. She also launched a lawsuit as well, saying it's unconstitutional to be keeping her and holding her in Canada. So I guess this is a way for Huawei to finally fight back?
Well, it is. I mean, Huawei, in a sense, has the direct attention of the U.S. government and all the tech companies in the U.S., as you mentioned earlier, in terms of smartphone and also in terms of telecom equipment. I mean, they're the biggest maker of telecom equipment in the world. They're slugging it out with Cisco in that area. They're slugging it out with Cisco and all the carriers here for 5G supremacy. Huawei, is, in a sense, wants to leverage its growth in phones and through 5G to become the biggest smartphone seller in the world. So, they've got the attention. They're also on the front line of this Cold War between the U.S. and China. And they seem to be the one company the U.S. government is obsessed with.
Well, that and ZTE, which is the other Chinese telco as well. And, the U.S. has been pressuring its allies to stop working with Huawei. But Germany today, it looks like Germany is going to go ahead and continue to use Huawei equipment in their 5G rollout. So I found it surprising that Huawei said that the U.S. is only a small portion of their $100 billion in revenue each year. So do you think this hurts the company?
That's true. I mean, yeah, in terms of the smartphone market, Huawei is number 3 now. They keep climbing.
I think they surpassed Apple last year in July.
They did briefly. Yeah, they did, and now they were back to number 3 during the last quarter. But you're right. They probably will pass Apple again. Mm-hmm. And what they're doing is they sell inexpensive phones. They're very aggressive on 5Gs, as is Samsung. But the thing is, most of their sales come through China and that region of the world. They don't really have much of a presence in the U.S., but they want to. And in a sense, through their aggressive pursuit of 5G, whether in China or even in the U.S., they're a pretty good position right now.
Well, but do you think they even have a hope of winning this lawsuit, or is it just, I don't know, to buy some time for them until they figure things out?
I don't think so. But what's really interesting to me is last week I was at Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, and the rumor at the show, which was not denied by some of the U.S. companies, was that we had members of the U.S. State, Defense, and I believe it was the Commerce Departments who were at the show watching Huawei. I mean, kind of following them, kind of keeping their eyes on them. And I think that's really significant because you have the two things going on. The two big issues at that show were 5G and the foldable phones, both of which Huawei was at the center of attention. So I think they're thinking about Huawei not just now, but they're thinking about them in terms of 5G in 2020 and beyond.
Yeah, well, apparently, according to reports, some of these State Department officials were actually there to also try to convince allies to stop working with Huawei and putting their equipment in their telecoms as well, because it could be a conduit for spying.
Exactly. I mean, this is really, I mean, it's incredible when you think about it. With 5G and where it's going to go once it's adopted, which will take a while, it'll take a year or two. the last thing they probably want is this company Huawei, which they are so concerned about being the preeminent carrier of 5G in not just China, but the U.S., for instance.
Yeah, so let me ask you about that, because that is the selling point that Huawei says. Look, if you want advanced 5G, we are the leader in this space. So if the U.S. stops working with Huawei, stops using their equipment to build out 5G, does that put the U.S. behind?
Yeah, well, you know, it's hard, and handicapping the U.S. probably is behind China in this aspect. It's so important to the Chinese economy that they're going in, they're making the investment. That's a difference between their government and here in the U.S., where we have companies that are plowing money into this. I mean, this takes time to build this network.
Yeah.
There aren't very many 5G phones available. I mean, Samsung will have one coming out I think a couple coming out in April. But mid-year. But here's the problem. The infrastructure is not ready here. AT&T, I think, is going to be ready in about 21 cities, but the phones aren't available. The network is going to take years to build out. I'm thinking 2022 before it really takes off. And Huawei is, in a sense, kind of leveraging this and taking advantage of this with the help of their governments.
And hopefully, when it does roll out, we'll actually get those fast download speeds that they've promised.
Yeah, supposedly,
John.
right.
Yeah,
eventually.
Great. Hey, great to see you today. And don't forget to keep that umbrella in the office. Jon Swartz there in San Francisco.